It's showtime. So if you tell me it's showtime, it is showtime. It is Sunday morning. Sunday morning coming down with Dr. Jene Bramel, Chris Allen. We're going to go over some injury updates. We're going to give our thoughts on the games. We're going to answer some starts and sits. And we actually have some football going on right now. I actually saw a catch for Kyle Pitts on the first drive. And, only a field goal for Atlanta. So not exactly a lot of offensive fireworks in London. But, Gene, I'm going to hand it off to you. We're going to go over the important injury news of the day. And I'm going to let your lead go into this. You said someone's going to make a liar out of you today between the Cardinals and the Bengals. Unpack that for us, because I want to say this, I often embarrass you, Gene, but you've got all the years of experience. You've watched these teams, you've watched these staffs, and you have a good feel for what a team is saying or how they project that they're handling injury doesn't quite match reality. But then that also makes you feel a little bit uncertain about how to predict it, because you can tell there's some slippage there. So Chase Edmonds, Joe Mixon, these running back situations, unpack why you feel like one of these teams might make a liar out of you, and how would they do that?
Well, we always like to feel like we're just playing detective work here, and we're working with lots of limited information. We're definitely not sitting in front of the player, listening to how they feel, have exam results, imaging studies, all those sorts of things. So we're working with all kinds of incomplete information. That's not an excuse. That's just to say that we're sort of trying to divine what's going on behind the scenes before we get to on the field time on Sunday into Monday night. So to my eyes, Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon are not 100%. Into my ears, I guess I haven't seen that from Mixon yet, because he didn't return after Thursday night's game.
Right.
And what the teams have been saying, sounds optimistic at times, but there's really nothing to support that. So, more and more over the years, teams have restricted practice reps, thinking that there's less and less contact. There's not a whole lot to be done through walkthroughs anyway. They're more or less mental reps. So how much stock do we put in the practice participation? Well, in Cincinnati's case, Zach Taylor, who usually doesn't say all that much, said earlier in the week that if Mixon did not return to a full speed practice, does that mean a couple of reps? Does that mean anything close to a limited situation? It's hard to know. That he would not play this week, and he never did that. Yes, there was a Saturday evaluation, but that's not a team session. None of the other players were likely on the field doing that much. Does that really count as a full speed practice? It's hard to know. These low grade, high ankle sprains can still be difficult to recover from. They're not the 3 to 6 week injuries that we'll sometimes see other players deal with, but it is a very difficult injury to brace and support. Running backs, all players, but running backs in particular, are taken down around the ankles frequently. So it's an often aggravated injury, and not significantly so, but any movement of that joint in that direction is going to cause some trouble. So you wonder, are they going to be in line for any more than 8 to 12 touches? How effective will they be? How early in the game could they be aggravated? So it's just hard to know. The tone of the NFL Network reporters, both Tom Pelicero and Ian Rappaport, through Saturday, overnight, Sunday morning, has been pretty positive, saying that he's going to play, slated to go, whatever you want to make of that. But he's clearly going to be less than 100%. I feel like it's conspicuous to me that Adam Schefter has been silent on this in ESPN. Not that the Bengals have a ton of sources that they let out, but that's notable to me. I'm still not convinced that Mixon's going to be active, I guess, is my long way of getting to that. And I don't know that he's going to be effective if that's the case. Now, he may surprise us all, have 15 carries and do just fine with them, but I don't know that that's going to be the case. Chase Edmonds looked to me like he had a fairly painful AC sprain by video. We got very little from Arizona during the week about what the injury was, what his status was. Were they holding him back all week just to do treatment and then let him do a little bit on Friday and then he looked fine? Maybe that's the case. Adam Schefter, when he says expected to play and provides no other context with it at all, generally that's a pretty reassuring sign. That suggests that a player is pretty close to full strength, knowing that no NFL player really ever is. So I'm thinking that Mixon is not likely to do much if he's active at all, and Edmonds is likely to see his full workload. Is that the way that plays out? I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm wrong on both counts, just based on how things sometimes go. But I'm nervous about Cook and Mixon, and I'm pretty optimistic on Edmonds for now.
I have breaking news. Kyle Pitts is an NFL football player. We have confirmation. He can still score touchdowns in the NFL. All right,
confetti,
back to you, Chris Allen.
Confetti.
Yeah,
all right.
Exactly.
So let's see. So let's kick it over to the Minnesota side. And I know that's another team that we were talking about pre-show. I mean, Dr. Gene, Dalvin Cook, This ankle thing sounded like he's also trending in the same direction as Joe Mixon, but after limited practices or almost no practice this week, I was leaning towards Alexander Madison and them sitting them against the Lions. But I mean, what do you think? What does your intuition tell you?
I think this is another situation where players want to play. Zimmer's an old school coach, allow him to play. He was able at points last week to look somewhat effective against a little bit more difficult situation in Cleveland that I'll face in Detroit today. That may end up working against him if the game script goes such that Minnesota's ahead. But I'm nervous about this too. I think Cook is in the same place that Mixon could be a couple of weeks from now, whereas we've just got this injury that we really never allowed to heal, can be aggravated just within normal gameplay, and we don't really know where things are going to stand. I can't remember exactly. I don't think the Vikings have a bye for a couple of weeks yet. I don't know that we're going to see him fully healthy until that point if we continue to play through this. He's been cleared to talk to the media and sounding optimistic, but as the week has gone on, it seems pretty clear that he's still less than full strength, and that the Vikings know that Alexander Madison can be productive in his absence, and especially with the game against the Lions. Maybe we're not going to need to see Dalvin Cook for 18 to 20 touches. So this is a game where I'm hoping that Cook, it sounds like he's going to be active. If he is active, that you really hope that he gets through the game without any more setbacks, and he's in a much better place next week and then beyond.
Gene, yesterday, George Kittle was put on injured reserve. Just give me your reaction. I mean, I feel like, wow, a team did the right thing. I actually decided to, even though George Kittle could play, it would affect his level of play for the rest of the year if they let him keep playing. It sounds like he's going to just do 3 weeks on the IR for rest and be back for week 8. Is there anything else that you can deduce about the nature of his injury from the fact that now 4 weeks after the injury, they put him on IR?
No, I think this is the benefit of having a shortened time frame for a designated return only being 3 weeks. It's probably easier to stash players there, and then there's no question anymore. Are we going to try to get through practice? Is the next step going to be an aggravating situation for the calf strain? It's hard to know. And Kittle's a player that I think he still played 92% of the snaps last week. Didn't look so bad in doing so, but clearly didn't come out of the game nearly as healthy as they hoped or expected. And after a while, you can have an 85% Kittle for the rest of the season, or you can, again, just throwing out percentage numbers, or you can hopefully have a fully recovered player in a month. And this is going to be a month because the Niners have a bye in between time. It's going to be a 4-week recovery period for him now, including this week, that hopefully he is ready to go, and the Niners have ironed out whatever offensive issues need to be ironed out between Garoppolo and Kittle and Sermon and Mitchell and all that sort of stuff, and then they're ready to go through the second half of the year. So I don't think it tells us anything more other than it's probably been a more limiting injury than we expected, despite the targets and the productive situations he's had in the last couple of weeks.
Dr. Gene, I know we've been talking about players that may or may not be out. How about a guy that should be playing, and that's Amari Cooper? It was the ribs a couple weeks ago, hamstring last week. If we're expecting him to play this week, so far, what are you thinking about in terms of snaps, in terms of just overall production? Do you think he can hold up the whole game?
Yeah, I think so. This is Cooper as a player. So veteran players with relatively mild soft tissue strains and sprains. We have talked about this in the past where they know how to limit how they're moving around so that they can limit the chance of aggravation with these lower grade injuries. So it's not the same as a high ankle sprain necessarily. It's not the same as a back issue or a rib injury. Those are pain management situations that can be difficult, and sometimes teams and medical staffs and players don't have that much control over. I feel like players do in some respect. But the Cowboys are full of weapons. Cooper has had fewer targets in the last 3 weeks than he did in week 1. Is that game script dependent? Is that weapons? Is that because his hamstring and ribs were limiting him a little bit more? It's difficult to know. I'm nervous that there might be, high enough risk of aggravation where we could see him miss some snaps as he did last week. This is not without risk at all, but I do think he's got a chance to be productive.
Gene, what do we do with, aside from attractiveness or lack of attractiveness of the matchup? Cortland Sutton, ankle, Devontae Parker, hamstring, and we can also talk about the history of these two players and how that gives us context. Injured during practice this week. How do we handle them in lineup decisions today?
When I started writing on Saturday, I really was not worried about Cortland Sutton much at all. It was described as a rolled ankle. Those kind of outside low ankle sprains are generally not a huge deal. They can be taped and supported in a much more reassuring way than what a high ankle sprain would be able to. And there was lots of optimism around the team and the beat writers that suggested this is a minor situation, not likely to limit him. So it was a little bit disconcerting to see Adam Schefter tweet overnight that the Broncos aren't ready to declare him ready to play yet and that he's going to be a pregame decision. I still think he's likely to go. And again, if he does, that's not an injury where you think would be at a high risk of aggravation and limited snaps and targets and what have you, assuming it's been reported accurately. So I'm not too worried about Sutton today, right? I mean, why would somebody say rolled ankle if it was something else? It was just a little bit weird. That of all the overnight things, I wasn't surprised. Okay, Mixon's going to try to play. They might put Cook out there, even if they're limited. We kind of knew that was all those things were a possibility. But the most eye-opening overnight tweet from Schefter and Rappaport and the crew this morning was to see that Sutton was a game time decision. I didn't expect that to be the case. Devontae Parker, I think this is what we're getting with Parker. He's just a player that is going to have some nagging things that he needs to be limited in practice. The shoulder situation is something he's been dealing with for weeks. That was a non-issue, but to have some hamstring soreness is what it was called on Thursday. Nice to see him back to a limited practice on Friday. I didn't hear anything about whether or not we should consider him a quote unquote true game time decision or not, but I don't know that there's so much upside with Devontae Parker that we need to be too worried about that anyway. I think he's likely to play. Whether or not he makes it through the game is another question.
Either of the Lions, pretty much the only Detroit Lions players that you're probably going to be starting, Hawkinson or Swift, have any doubts that they'll be able to make it through the game or be any more productive than we would typically expect them to be?
I haven't seen anything in the usage for Deandre Swift or post game comments, middle of the week, post practice press conferences that suggest that groin injury is bothering him any more now than it was in week 1 and week 2. And Jamal Williams either. I think they were just giving those players some extra time during the week for treatment and rest and not putting them in a position where they might aggravate an injury. So no, I'm not too concerned about those. TJ Hawkinson played most of the snaps last week. There wasn't an obvious injury that I'm aware of. There wasn't anything reported earlier in the week of concern. So it's a little bit odd for him not to be practicing on Wednesday. And the beat writers didn't feel like he did that much in the approach to practice they were able to observe on Thursday. They were a little bit surprised to hear that he was improving and expected to go. I don't know how much stock to put in that, but there was more than one decent beat writer in Detroit. I think it was Kyle Meinke, and then I'm trying to remember who the other one that I saw was probably Dave Burkett, that mentioned that this was a little bit unusual that he did as much as he did on Friday. So another tweet from Adam Schefter overnight essentially saying he's expected to play. Again, those always reassure me a little bit. So I think we should be good with Hawkinson, but that might be a situation we need to keep an eye on.
I think we've covered all the important injury issues for lineup setting today, Gene. And Chris and I will talk about more as they come up tangentially to some start sits. So I want to ask you a couple quick hitters before you send you on your way, Gene. Okay. Percent chance we see Christian McCaffrey play next week?
98.
Okay.
I mean, it really sounds like he's going to go. I think he was probably close this week, but they're just trying to be cautious with him. This is meshing pretty well with all of the reports that we've heard from the beginning that this was maybe a little bit of a lower grade injury that was initially suspected. They didn't put him on injured reserve, and he was seemingly already bargaining to play Wednesday into Thursday. So the fact that they got him through a limited practice, reconditioning should be behind him at this point. Window of aggravation should be a lot less next week. I'll be surprised if he's not maybe even fully practicing by the end of the week.
Okay, for the folks that may be making last second waiver wire, you have one more spot. Maybe George Kittle got put on IR and you have a spot to fill. Jarrett Patterson comes up, Washington football team. Antonio Gibson, we find out he has a stress fracture in his shin. If there was a bet, Gene, over or under 0.5 games that Gibson will miss because of the stress fracture over the course of the rest of the year, would you take the over or the under?
I would take the over. I mean, I'm not saying that means he's going to be missing a month necessarily. I'm trying to be reassured by the fact that he told reporters that he wasn't really feeling any pain. But this is no longer a soft tissue bruise anymore. It's a bone situation, and it's the big weight-bearing bone on the lower part of the body. And you're already seeing a little bit of a split and a trend towards J.D. Mckissic and Patterson. Patterson's gotten some more snaps and some more rushes in the last couple of weeks as before. So 2 DNPs this week is a little bit of a change from what we've seen before. This is an injury that is not likely to heal until he's given some time to rest, and whether that's a week or more is hard to know. Washington doesn't have a bye until week 9, so he's not going to get a couple of weeks off until we get to that point, unless Washington holds him out. So, I mean, just from a game theory perspective, it doesn't make a lot of sense to take the under there. But I'm not saying that this is likely to be a 3 to 4 week absence anytime soon. It's more week to week than it is snap to snap,
Right.
I guess is what I'm saying.
Dr. Gene is a weight-bearing bone. You're the femur of the football guy's body, Gene. Really, folks, if you don't subscribe to Football Guys, you can get the injury rounds. We appreciate you coming here on Thursday nights, on Tuesdays for the waiver wire show, on Sunday mornings, because I rely on Gene's information. We all do, and you learn, just like everybody else at Football Guys that you follow, you learn a lot about how to process these things and understand them from the good Dr. Gene. We love spending Sunday mornings with you. Thank you, sir.
Yep. Appreciate y'all. Stay well. Hopefully we have a relatively quiet day.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Yes. Except for the Kyle Pitts touchdowns. Pitts touchdowns. We're not staying quiet with that. It's funny. Lee Smith, the quasi tackle, is still catching passes. All right, Chris, let's get into this. And thanks everybody for turning out. Try to pick questions based on how they can illuminate some things for other people, but also some of the, we want to reward the people. Usually I'll start, the earlier you get here, the earlier you get a question in the chat, the more likely I'll be able to answer your specific question. And then folks, again, also, if we don't get to you in here, maybe I might be able to hit you on Twitter as we get closer to kickoff. Mookie, what's up, Mookie? Mookie says my tight ends are Kittle and Gronk, who's a good pickup. Mo Alley Cox. I'm just gonna say Mo Alley Cox.
Mo Alley Cox, Ricky Seals-Jones.
Ricky Seals-Jones, yes. I picked up Ricky Seals-Jones in a few dynasty leagues. He made one of the plays of the year, right? I mean, his touchdown in week 2 was gorgeous.
Oh
he can still play.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not going to go Darren Waller.
Oh, no, no, absolutely not. Or if you want to go really deep, you want to throw in Max with 2 X's, go Max Williams.
Yes.
Should be in a very good game. One of the higher game totals, although I'm not entirely certain that game's going to wind up hitting its total, but at least it looks attractive from a fantasy perspective, like going into it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think those are some fair options. You should be.
Yeah, and those are all guys that can play, And Max Williams, after all the knee injuries, I really thought he was never going to look like the second round pick he was for Baltimore. And now I think it's also because Arizona, it's kind of like the Dallas situation, Chris, where there's so many targets at wide receiver. There's so much to worry about that if Max Williams is going to beat us, if Dalton Schultz is going to beat us, then we can live with that. And I think that's why Max Williams is a good name to bring up also.
Which, like, over at this same point a year ago, in a Kyler Murray offense, we were not thinking that at all. It was just Kyler Murray, it was DeAndre Hopkins, and that was the end of it. And then this year, it's not even DeAndre Hopkins at this point. It's everybody. It's everybody. It's AJ Green, which I love to still see AJ Green doing his thing after leaving Cincinnati. But I mean, it's AJ Green, it's Christian Kirk, it's Rondale Moore. I mean, we're considering Chase Edmonds as a weekly RB2 possibly. So James Conner, so it's just it's fun to see this like actual Cliff Kingsbury offense being the thing that we expect it to be, although it's taken a couple years.
It's fun. It's fun for the Phoenix Suns fans out there. This is your rebound, and this is what they call a transition, Chris. Justin Haynes has a good question. There's a lot to talk about on both sides here. James Conner, who you mentioned. Now, James Conner has 2 games with no touchdowns, 2 games with 2 touchdowns. The opportunities are there. And then, as Dr. Gene talked about, with Chase Edmonds, a relatively painful injury, and sure, he's going to play. Okay, we'll see. And James Conner can take the load. I mean, you don't want James Conner to take the load for 16, 17 games, but in a 1-game situation, James Conner can take the load. So there's some extra upside there with Conner. The other side is Allen Robinson. Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah.
But, so we saw last week that Justin Fields can make the throws. We saw over the course of the week that Matt Nagy relented basically and said, yes, Justin Fields is the starter, even though I think Andy Dalton wasn't on the injury report. So all that talk of Andy Dalton's the starter when healthy. So, the next time a coach goes on and on and on that says, this guy's our starter when healthy, you can always point to the situation for a specific situation and tell people, here's one where the coach, now it's coach can be coach specific, situation specific. However, you also have, but another complicating factor here, Chris, Chicago is, maybe now that they've committed to Fields, we could see a little bit more, and they're playing Las Vegas. So it's Allen Robinson. I mean, I know that in a vacuum, it seems like, well, I'll take my chances with Allen Robinson over James Conner, but there's so many variables here. Also, it's a 0.5 PPR, which tends to favor the running back. Conner, Robinson, give us your thoughts.
I'd have to lean Allen Robinson. That's just because I can't believe this. We've seen just a consistent drop in targets over the past few weeks. I think he went from 4, 6, and then down to 3, I think last week or whatever. But I can't believe this is going to be something that's going to continue on throughout the season. I mean, if you'd told me the same thing at the beginning of the year, saying that it's going to be Darnell Mooney as the wide receiver 1 in Chicago, I wouldn't believe you. So I just think that it's more of Justin Fields getting acclimated to whatever Bill Lazor or Matt Nagy are trying to set up for him.
Right.
And he had that time last week. He now gets they're playing in Vegas, or
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So either way, I mean, Vegas has been able to generate a decent amount of pressure. You know that he's going to at least, hopefully, the coaching staff has been able to design more of those rollouts for him so he can get out of the pocket. He should be able to connect not only with Darnell Mooney, who's actually also, I thought he was nursing some sort of injury throughout earlier part of the week as well.
Groin,
yeah, something like that. So it's just like I just can't see there's no drop in talent, obviously, from for Allen Robinson. So I just think it's more of getting on the same page with his quarterback, which they've had an additional week in order to do so. So I'm Allen Robinson, no doubt for me.
Yeah, and then sometimes when you're at that precipice, Chris, when you're about to click the check mark, it's just talent and ability, and some of that has to do with Justin Fields and Bill Lazor. John Thompson has a good one here. Again, we could just give us a chance to touch on these players and where we're at their value. James Robinson. And James Robinson, it's funny, Chris, like if we just didn't have the first 2 weeks of the year and we were just going on week 3 and 4 and James Robinson, we'd say this is exactly what we expected after Travis Etienne went down. James Robinson is a borderline running back 1, right? And DeAndre Hopkins, who, if we just looked at week 1, we'd say DeAndre Hopkins is a stud. I'm glad I took him in the second round. I don't care how many targets he got because he turned 2 into very high difficulty touchdowns. But now you see this offense leveling off as you laid out. There's so many targets for Kyler Murray. DeAndre Hopkins or James Robinson for John Thompson in a full PPR.
I'm gonna go back to DeAndre Hopkins here because it's just I have that just sneaking suspicion. Hopefully, Urban Meyer just kind of like sits off to the side this week and doesn't mess with, because like Carlos Hyde is back practicing in full.
You just need to wrap him up with duct tape and put him in the closet or something and let the team play.
Sit him there. Yeah, just like hey, you know, the game actually starts at 4 today when it really starts. I think they got that early, right? So just tell him the wrong game time and just be like,
put him on a plane to London. The Jags are supposed to play in London a couple times a year anyway, right?
Game starts at 4 o'clock. We'll see you there. Then, like, by that time, the game will be over. Hopefully, like that, there's no meddling in the backfield, and it's James Robinson. But either way, even though I do think that should be like the Jacksonville versus Tennessee, that's actually been like a fairly exciting game historically, if I'm remembering right. I know they've had the
AFC South matchups, like throw the records out, throw the momentum of the teams out. You have no idea what's going to happen in this matchup. Yeah, right.
And if we can consider James Robinson to have his similar usage to what we saw against the Thursday night game against Cincinnati, then okay, fine. But we don't know. That's the sad part. We don't know with Urban Meyer and the Carlos Hyde thing, if that's going to be a part of the game plan for today. So I still lean going back to DeAndre Hopkins, even if we think that he's still nursing some sort of shoulder injury or whatever the case may be. The routes run have still been there. The targets we still believe should be there as well. Hopefully Trey Lance shows something in their start that they still have to fight back a bit. And after Kyler Murray now ascending in terms of a passer, not just as a rusher, which we already know him to be, those yardage, the yardage totals should start to oscillate back towards DeAndre Hopkins. At least we know that him and Kyler Murray have been on the same page for quite some time. I still think that there's enough fantasy juice there within that entire game. DeAndre Hopkins should be able to get a decent piece of it. I lean Hopkins for sure.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk anybody out of playing DeAndre Hopkins. I will say that Tennessee's defense is not good. And we'll see. If you ever seen 9 to 5, Chris?
Yeah.
Dolly Parton, Jane. That's what we need, right? We need Dolly Parton and Lily Tomlin, Jane Fonda to go ahead and kidnap. I'm not advocating kidnapping, okay? I'm not actually advocating kidnapping. It's a really subversive movie. It's a really subversive movie. Like, when you go back in context, you gotta love 9 to 5. You mentioned Trey Lance real quick, without context, Chris, without knowing the other side, like but in general, do you think you'd be more inclined to tell people to play Trey Lance if they're thinking about it, or not? Let him sit and let's see what he does.
I would say, as with all things, it depends, but it depends on who your other starter is.
Like if it's like Kirk Cousins, if it's like a Kirk Cousins or a Derek Carr or someone.
Yeah, because I got similar questions throughout the week. It was like Ryan Tannehill or Trey Lance.
Right.
And like I still lean towards Trey Lance at this point, even though we should be still getting AJ Brown back. But I think that's about where it's like, the Ryan Tannehill, Kirk Cousins of the world, maybe even Sam Darnold, if you still not completely buying in like after a month. I think that's where you want to shoot for upside. I mean, I think the stat or the number everybody's been throwing around all week is 20.4 fantasy points in just the one half that he played last week, and he didn't even play well. Right.
No.
I mean, from at least objectively, he was not
tentative.
He did not play. Yes, I think that's a great word to encapsulate like what we saw from him in that one half of play. So even though most of it was on that 76-yard touchdown on a busted coverage to Deebo Samuel. Yeah. So we can't really expect that to continue to happen on a week in and week out basis. But if we can at least see like that much upside just in one half of play, you give him a full game, full week of practice where Kyle Shanahan can hopefully take the training wheels off, allow him some more rushing opportunities as well. I lean towards that upside that at least back in the offseason we thought was going to be just a weekly thing for Trey Lance. So I lean towards him on this week.
I would say if you have any inclination to play Trey Lance, play Trey Lance. Play him. Yeah. I mean, unless we're talking about guys like Josh Allen and Kyler Murray and Mahomes and guys like that. Donald Payne has a question here. Chuba Hubbard and Zach Moss is the choice here in place of McCaffrey. And with Hubbard, I want to unpack this a little bit because you can do a glass half full, glass half empty take here. The glass half full take is in the first half, he was basically the guy. And then in the second half, they did a lot as they were behind big. They went more to Rodney Smith. Now, is that going to happen today against Philadelphia? I don't know. And then you have Zach Moss, and we could talk a little bit about the proposition that he represents, but it's kind of like James Conner, except with even more momentum, even though he might not have the upside of Conner. Moss or Hubbard? This one's not easy.
No, and I actually do kind of lead Hubbard there. The one reason why I might think that Moss has a bit more upside is just if you look at the Chiefs' defense, like while their secondary is already questionable. I mean, Tyrann Mathieu like still kind of doing his thing, but for the most part, their defensive front, I mean, they've been allowing like quite a few running backs to actually make their day off on production, like on the ground. So, and also on top of that, like since if most of y'all know me, like FFWX in my Twitter handle, that's for the weather portion. There actually is a significant amount of rain that's projected for the game tonight, like for the Bills-Chiefs game. It's supposed to be like fairly heavy downpour, like towards the second half. So I'm not saying that it's going to completely take out the passing games or they're going to completely rely on the run. But if we do, I would at least think that there would be shorter ADOT passes. Now for Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, that's probably longer than most quarterbacks in the league, even if they do tamp it down a bit. Either way, I do think that Zach Moss should at least be the beneficiary of some of those passes because we have seen him involved in the passing game like quite a bit, like so far this season. Yeah. Him or Devin Singletary, honestly.
Yes.
So I do lean more towards Zach Moss because at least with Chuba, it was Rod Smith and any of the other like ancillary backs like getting involved in the passing game. Like while you're right to say that it was more of a game script thing, I think Zach Moss is in a better game environment, at least a high score total. Hopefully it's not going to be severely impacted by the weather tonight. But either way, I do think that Zach Moss has at least a slight edge right now.
Zach Moss is like that right now. That just keep rolling 7. So Hubbard hasn't done anything yet to make me feel compelled to put him in. Maybe I'll regret it, and then the window will be closed because McCaffrey back. I'm going with Moss. Because of the momentum there. Like you said, with the Chiefs tight ends, and so it's Dawson Knox. A lot of Dawson Knox questions. Yeah, you're going to go with Knox, tight ends and running backs. A good weather note there. And that would be a shame because the Buffalo Kansas City game last year in the regular season was in kind of inclement weather, and then
we just had to do this last Sunday night with
right?
With the Bucs
New England and Tampa, and then the Buffalo Kansas City game in the playoffs was just a letdown because Buffalo didn't really answer the bell. Ronald Gill said this would be top of the show, by the way. Smash the like button. I just want to remind folks, if you're enjoying what we're doing here, throughout everything we do on the Football Guys channel, like, comment, subscribe. Love seeing that subscriber number go up. Y'all are helping us build something, and that's the best way to show support for the show. If it helps you out, or it just helps you enjoy your Sunday morning. I got to get this in because kickers are people too. Mike Reville said Max Williams, Ross Dwelly, and I think Max Williams is the call there. We talked about him earlier, but Harrison Butker or Randy Bullock. I just want to give kickers some love. You don't even really have to answer that if you want, but I think the answer is probably Harrison Butker.
I agree. Offense. Yeah, it's the Chiefs offense. Yeah, absolutely. If there's a chance like him or Tyler Bass on the other side, I mean, kickers,
could be a kicker fest. So a lot of questions about, and I can't pick out specific data points here, but there's a lot of questions, Chris, about Mitchell and Sermon. Okay, a lot of that is Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon. because Mitchell, I think he was taken off the injury report. But then you have Sermon, who looked good last week. You also have the very fascinating angle here of the San Francisco running game with Trey Lance, and how much does that open up? Again, we can go back to what Robert Griffin III did in a Kyle Shanahan offense. Alfred Morris led the league in rushing, I believe, as a rookie in that offense because the defenses had to play 11 on 11. So, I mean, I'm kind of a scaredy cat here. I'd say, like, I'm probably not playing either one. Also, because I just wonder if San Francisco is going to be playing from behind. But I think it could be rewarded. Do you have any other guidance for folks that are, and if we get some specific ands ors, but I just want to treat this topic as a whole of Mitchell and Sermon today and maybe going forward.
Yeah, I think the more I think about it from a schematic standpoint, just for today, Arizona's strength on defense has been like their defensive front so far. Like they've been generating, I think, like just north of like around 30% pressure. So it's like, and the running backs against them haven't typically done well. I think Dalvin Cook is the only 100-yard rusher that they've allowed so far. And I think that was back in week 2. Otherwise, they kept Derrick Henry in check for quite a bit. James Robinson didn't really get much done against them as well. So if I'm leaning towards either of them, I mean, I would possibly lean Trey Sermon just for the fact that you could probably wind up with one of those like short touchdowns after like a holding penalty in the end zone, because if you were looking at a goal line type situation, they're not going to toss Elijah Mitchell into that situation. It'll probably wind up being Trey Sermon. But that's the only reason why I would lean, because I know like folks like JJ Zachariason have done studies on the mobile quarterbacks and what their benefit could or could not be towards pass catching running backs, and it's not always the best. So if that's Elijah Mitchell's role in that offense, and really we only see him possibly supporting the 2 wide receivers, Deebo Samuel and like hopefully like Brandon Ayuk, like, you know, starts to come out of his shell a bit. Even without George Kittle, it's like, but are we really expecting him now to support 3 pass catchers today? And it's just, that's difficult for me to see. So I would rather just look at it, just play it straight up. If you've got Deebo Samuel, you're starting him. Brandon Ayuk, you have to flex him. Okay, fine. Trey Sermon, if you have to play him as an RB2, okay. But other than that, like, I'm trying to at least see what this offense looks like with, especially in this divisional matchup, and then afterwards trying to evaluate it moving forward afterwards.
Yeah, it's tough to discern. And someone mentioned too, how does the loss of Kittle affect the running game? And we have Elijah Mitchell, who the team really seemed to trust in week 1 and 2. Then he gets hurt. Sermon, who they didn't really seem to trust too much in week 3, in week 4, more trust, looked better. It was a Seattle run defense. How do they allot the workload? I mean, it could be something where Kyle Shanahan doesn't know for certain until we see how things go during the game. Chris Moore added a data point to this. The San Francisco running backs, and I like this because it gives us a chance to talk about Kadarius Toney. So Kadarius Toney, San Francisco running backs, or Chase Claypool, to take that and run whatever direction you want with it.
I kind of like Kadarius Toney. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, coming into the season, it was more of I'm not gonna say it was a joke, but I just found it humorous that this was the choice that the Giants made, instead of either making more moves along their offensive line, adding in like at least more talent to go alongside Kenny Gallaudet, and they take a gadgety like type wide receiver, a guy that you have to manufacture touches for. At least that was his calling card back in college. But once he got on the field last week, you saw why. I mean, that athleticism was completely undeniable. And with Sterling Shepard again out this week, that's been confirmed, right? He's not supposed to play.
Yeah, so, he's out. Slayton's out. Yeah,
that's what I thought. Okay, yeah. So then he takes over that role for Shep in the slot. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there was enough. I saw enough from last week that it made it easier to see, 1, why they drafted him, and 2, why they should continue to go to him, especially in this matchup today against the Cowboys. Yeah, I think he's in line for at least more touches than, at least more productive touches than what we might see for Chase Claypool.
Yeah, and Claypool, it's Roethlisberger. Look, the Steelers Broncos game is going to be a slop fest. All right.
Yeah.
Offensively, it's not going to be a good offensive game. And it's not going to be a game that produces overachievers. The Giants and Cowboys might, and just Toney looks so good. And I'm with you. It was this new thing, almost like a pool. Like, what you have this week for Kadarius Toney missing practice? Is it an injury? Is it a personal reason? Is it, he's not integrated in the offense yet? And then you see him and he looks spectacular. The suddenness just looks spectacular. out there. And yeah, hopefully they will continue to build on that. One of the nice things about getting to do start sit questions over the course of the week is, I mean, for me, as I have chances, if a player keeps coming up and I'm constantly recommending that player, I'm realizing I'm pretty excited about that player. I'm pretty excited I'm excited about this game. The 4-game afternoon slate this week is just tremendous. Every single one of the games is so compelling. That Chargers-Browns game is compelling. The San Francisco Arizona game, the Giants and Dallas, and even the Khalil Mack Bowl we already mentioned. All right, David Meyer. Again, these players are thorny right now. Manny Sanders, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, Tyler Boyd, and he needs to sit one.
I'll take the last 3.
You said Manny.
Yeah, I said I'll sit Manny. Since we just talked with Dr. Gene about Amari Cooper earlier. Now, while I'm not saying that Amari Cooper is not going to at least play well, at least play his like normal a lot amount of snaps, but with Dr. Gene talking about the high risk of aggravation, he's also most likely going to see James Bradbury. Not to say that wide receiver cornerback matchups, I don't put a ton of stock into them, but at least that allows easier defensive attention for CeeDee Lamb. And we're already starting to see at least him being left out in the cold, like more or less. And we were talking earlier about whether it's going to be Cooper, whether it's going to be Lamb, whether it's going to be Schultz, whether it's going to be Jarwin, Zeke, possibly, who knows? But seeing his targets also start to dip back like week after week, almost the same way that we were talking about like Allen Robinson earlier. It's not a talent thing. It's just the offense takes what it can get. And so this week, given what we're already seeing like from Amari Cooper, I can't see the same target share continuing to be the case for the rest of the season. So I would lean more towards CeeDee Lamb. People have been talking about AJ Brown being at least a sneaky play in DFS pretty much for the past like 2 or 3 days since he started to at least make his trend back towards playing this week, especially this week against Jacksonville. Yeah, you're starting him. Then Tyler Boyd. Even if T. Higgins is supposed to be back, we know that offense is concentrated on that trio. I'm taking absolutely nothing from the CJ Uzomah games, like while Higgins was out. I still think that it's still going to be those 3 guys that offense, that passing offense is going to be concentrated around. If Joe Mixon doesn't play today, we've seen them kick up the passing rates historically, like even last year, like before Joe Burrow went down, those passing rates like increased with Joe Mixon out. So I just see like still a continued amount of targets like for Tyler Boyd today in a game that they should need to keep up with Aaron Rodgers, assuming like the Green Bay passing offense like comes to play. So yeah, those 3.
I love Burrow today. And I tend to, it's like, do you have the boldness to bench CeeDee Lamb? I mean, his numbers look like you should bench him. But you mentioned CeeDee Lamb and Allen Robinson may well be players like Robert Woods was on Thursday. Like if you keep trusting what you invested, if you keep trusting the quality of the player, you keep trusting the quality of the surroundings. We'll see about Robinson. But it's still there. Lamb still has Dak Prescott throwing to him. So I get it. And Boyd, I really like Joe Burrow today. If I were to, and I would agree, Sanders is the one I would bench, even though Sanders has plenty of upside. But if I was putting some DFS lineups in, man, I would try some Bengals stacks. I would be making some Bengals stacks today. The Packers defense is not good. Don't forget about what they did against the Steelers. It is not a good defense. And I love what I saw from Joe Burrow last week. And I'm just excited for the Bengals, man. I'm really fired up for the Bengals. I think this could be a game where they announce to the league, like, we're a little ahead of schedule. Yeah. And I just want to, on that note, by the way, this is an IDP question. By the way, remember Wednesday afternoons, IDP Blitz on the YouTube channel. Citron Physics said Kristen Kirksey, who get a lot of tackle opportunities against New England, or Logan Wilson. This is just a chance for me. Isn't Logan Wilson awesome? Don't we love Logan Wilson?
Yeah.
I mean, what a pick. What a great pick. That's this guy, we got to go back to like Odell Thurman for the last inside linebacker that really could command. Right, yeah, right. I'm just, I'm excited. It's so hard to be excited about the Steelers. It's like a long extended death scene. So I want to get excited about the Bengals. It's hard to get excited about the Browns right now. And the question, a player we haven't brought up yet, Donald Pump asks, DeAndre Swift or Damian Williams? We haven't had a chance to talk about what you do with Damian Williams in your lineups today, Chris.
Non-PPR, that's where, if it's non-PPR, that's where it's just like, I would probably lean towards Swift in that case. If Dr. Gene was saying earlier about like no reported setbacks, at least doesn't sound like there are any reported setbacks for DeAndre Swift. We're expecting the game to at least be competitive. Now, whether the Lions are going to be able to put up points, we'll see. But either way, if that game is expected to be competitive, Deandre Swift has been involved in both facets of the game, like from a rusher and also a pass catcher. Yeah, I would still lean towards Swift. It's just been more of the, whatever. I'm trying not to buy too much into coach speak, because what was it after the week 3, week 4 game? Campbell saying that he's supposed to be involved more. We saw more Jamal Williams this week, so I'm trying to stay out of it. But at least from a talent perspective, if it's non-PPR, even if Damian Williams is supposed to be the guy, I still lean towards Swift.
Yeah, I don't want to cross the wires for folks. I would probably go with Damian Williams simply because actually the non-PPR, I like Swift more in PPR because he's getting the 4 catches, sometimes more a game. Yeah. Although Damian Williams is also very good out of the backfield. I do think we're going to see Damian Williams get a lot of touches today as long as the game is close. I think the Bears defense will keep it close. And hopefully Justin Fields will open up some lanes. He looked good. Williams did. He did have the quad, but he looked good in relief of David Montgomery last week.
You have a take on Khalil Herbert?
He's an efficient runner. I mean, he's going to give you, he's got fresh legs. And I think that he can, if Justin Fields is used correctly, again, forcing the defense to play 11-on-11 football, opening up running lanes, doing some read options where, it's like the dog in the tennis ball. All right. Like if I'm preparing for the Bears, I want to keep this. This is more like a Thursday night thing, right? But I think that defenses are going to do with Justin Fields what they've done with Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson has now done his counterpunch, right? Where it's like, well, we keep you in the pocket and we make you think and we make you deliberate as a passer. Are you going to be able to do that? I think that's the mode that you want Justin Fields in if you're defending him, right?
Sure.
So I think if Bill Lazor, Matt Nagy have their head on straight, which who knows, you're going to use Justin Fields to cause the defense to overreact. You're going to use Justin Fields. You're going to move him. You're going to use him. You're going to assume they're focused on him and keeping him contained, and that could open up things. So more from a situational standpoint, I like Herbert, but there's a reason he fell to the Sixers. I don't think that Herbert's not one of those guys that you can squint. Even Elijah Mitchell, like some of these late round running backs, look, there's a reason they fall to the 6th or 7th round. But in a good situation, they can still be good fantasy running backs. That's my Khalil Herbert take. What about you?
That's fair. Yeah, and I think coming out of college, a good straight line runner. But
yeah, exactly. Just like Mitchell.
Yes, exactly. So it's just unless we're expecting the Chicago's offensive line to just create highways for either of them to run down, and he just winds up taking one of those, maybe like a 30-yarder to the house, somewhere along those lines. I just don't see him being mixed in enough to take away from Damian Williams. But just for some folks that after, I think because Damian Williams had some sort of thigh contusion or
quad
bruise. So if anybody picked up Herbert and was thinking that he might get sprinkled in, I'm not particularly seeing it. I think this is more of Damian Williams' thing. If he needs to rest for a breather or something like that, I can see Herbert coming in, but I'm not starting him at all this week.
No, Herbert, right. Herbert, Jarrett Patterson, these are guys that next man up type of pickups. And next week we may be talking about them on the waiver wire. These aren't players we're talking about on the waiver wire, but we are talking about them. And again, some things to tease apart here. Nicholas Wilkening gives us a chance to talk about Jonathan Taylor, Indianapolis playing tomorrow night at Baltimore. Full PPR makes this a little tough call here, right? Chris Godwin playing against Miami, Battle Florida today. Jonathan Taylor or Chris Godwin in a full PPR for Nicholas Wilkening?
Lean towards Chris Godwin there. I think that's where, if you wanted to, it doesn't really matter. I think Tom Brady is going full scorched earth, across the league from a passing perspective. I think they're first in pass rate over expectation. So it does not matter. He was passing against his old team, which was honestly, their secondary is still pretty good. But either way, if you want to attack the Miami Dolphins secondary, it has been through the slot. A number of slot receivers prior to have done well against them. So I would say that even I think when the Colts played against Miami, Michael Pittman, they wound up shifting him into the slot, and that's where he wound up actually making a decent amount on his production as well. So I would lean towards Chris Godwin this week. It could just as easily be Antonio Brown shifting into the same position and making his hay. But either way, I think I would lean towards Chris Godwin in this matchup.
Yeah, I probably would too, just because it's Baltimore. I don't like the idea of running at Baltimore. And I like Carson Wentz in this offense going forward. facing a lot of AFC South defenses, but Baltimore's not an AFC South defense. We haven't had a chance to talk about this guy yet. Frank Wildman, half PPR again, and we always obviously the answers can change depending on the scoring system, and you should always be weighing that. So half PPR, Kenny Gallaudet, and I've opined, Chris, and I'm not sure what to think about this because I just throw it out there. Like, is the Giants offense waking up and becoming some sort of juggernaut? We're going to see against Dallas this afternoon, which is a Dallas defense. We don't think Dallas defense is a juggernaut, but a lot better than we thought. We're going to have Trevon Diggs against Kenny Gallaudet. Paul Charchian pointed out on the couch this week that even though Diggs has 5 interceptions, I think he was also in the top 5 in like yards given up too.
Yep.
So, or we have Damian Harris. Damian Harris, right? New England's against Houston. That should be easy. New England also has 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen out.
Right.
Harris barely got any play last week, which made sense because it was Tampa Bay. So lots of questions leading to this question from Frank Gallaudet or Harris, half PPR.
Depends on where you're at in your matchup currently. If you happen to be behind after the Thursday game, if you're playing
if you started Russell Wilson and you need to make up some points,
or you're playing against Robert Woods and you need to make up those points, then I would lean towards Kenny Gallaudet. The Giants passing game, I think so far, like top half, or at least top half of the league in terms of EPA per play. Daniel Jones, 400 yards, like even missing like Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard. While I'm not expecting that to repeat this week, we already talked about the Giants and Cowboys game being a good game environment that you'd want some exposure to. And Kenny Gallaudet, his peripheral metrics have all looked great from a target share, routes run perspective. He is living on like a higher ADOT. I think it's like 15 yard ADOT, if I'm remembering right. But either way, if Slayton and Shepard are still supposed to be out, supposed to be the pecking order essentially is him on top with Tony and then the rest of the guys, Evan Ingram, whoever else. Saquon should also have a good day today too. I'm hoping to see that as well. So I would lean towards Kenny Gallaudet here, but if you are looking more towards the safety or floor, even with 3-4 offensive linemen for the Patriots, you hit the nail on the head. It's still Houston. I mean, we just watched them, even with the Bills kind of floundering in the red zone multiple times last week. They still put up 40 points, still didn't allow Houston to score a single point, not even a field goal last week. So I would lean Gallaudet if you think you really need the punch, really need the points. But if you're just going for security, Damian Harris.
Yeah, the term I heard about that Buffalo Houston game last week that I like, Chris, was poncho weather. Is that an official designation in the Chris Allen FFWX?
I like that. I heard that one too.
Yeah, poncho weather. So 40 points in poncho weather is worth 60 in regular weather.
Yeah, that should be. It should come up with an adjustment for that.
And by the way, you're on the email list. Again, get on the free email list. Joe Bryant's going to give you the Sunday morning updates you need. But I just want to say that it looks like Jeff Darlington reporting that Devontae Parker is not going to play. So the cover boy this week was Jalen Waddle on the thumbnail. And that's because Jalen Waddle's going to catch 12 passes, 15 passes, 18 passes.
The target
against Tampa. Exactly. Yeah. It might be 12 catches for 60 yards like it was earlier this year.
Yeah, him and Mckissic. It's just going to be them two.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So there's any start sit questions with Mckissic or Jalen Waddle, you have our answer there. This one is, and we're going to find out, assuming Dalvin Cook is active and we don't get any more peripheral information about how they plan on using him or how they feel about it or how he feels. David Soul asks, Cook or Madison? Cook or Madison?
I lean Madison here.
Yes.
I can't see, especially after last week, because
last week it was the right answer. Yeah.
And he wound up, I think at the first half, they looked interchangeable from the burst, from the moment they hit the hole. You could almost, you could just swap the jerseys and I'd be like, oh yeah, it looks like Dalvin Cook. Wait, that was Alexander Madison. Oh, okay, cool. But both have been similarly used in the passing game. Once I'd almost see a situation where even if both are active, what do you think is going to happen once they get down in a short yardage situation? Do you really think they're going to wind up throwing Dalvin Cook out there in order to get churn those yards? Or do you think that they wind up using him on early downs where the offensive line can wind up creating some of those holes if they continue to use him or run on first down? I think that leans more towards Alexander Madison being the more productive of the two. I just hope they wind up sitting him. They do have a bye they have a week 7 bye. So why not give him that rest in order to make sure that, because they've got such a long season ahead of them, they're still relatively competitive in the NFC North. Why not sit him? So, but that's neither here nor there. I definitely lean towards Madison in this case.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I was wrong. Actually, Madison had 10 carries to Cook's 9. Cook was actually the better play last week. But remember, Cook limped off last week.
Yep.
Cook wasn't able to practice this week. You have Dr. Gene saying, I think with Cook, the problem is,
right.
yeah, and with Cook, the problem is you have this risk of he goes out there for a series, doesn't feel right, and that's what you got this week. The other thing is it's Detroit, okay? It's Detroit. Who's going to get the mop-up work in the second half if Minnesota can run away from Detroit? Which, and I don't want to disrespect Detroit, but they've lost now. This is just terrible, Chris. Like if you said, who are the 5 best players on that team, right? Yeah. Jeffrey Okudah, out.
Yep.
Romeo Okwara, out. Penny Sewell, out. So
Frank Ragnow,
out. Taylor Decker,
out.
It's just like, man.
Yeah.
Play the Minnesota defense today. Play that Minnesota defense. Yeah. We got some different questions about Joe Mixon in the backfield, and someone said, "Is it just avoid Bengals backs?" I think it's just avoid Bengals backs today. You have anything else to add on that, Chris?
No, I think I mean, it's all about the passing game this week.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm really, really excited about that game.
No Zadarius Smith, no Jair Alexander. All about the
right. No Jair Alexander. Exactly. Alexander's out. This is going to be a really fun game, and because of that, by the way, just as a related question, no, it's not Kyle Pitts or Kyle Pitts or Kyle Pitts. Yes, Kyle Pitts. We're gonna bask. We're gonna bask in this. Phil Spill says Aaron Rodgers or Sam Darnold.
Ooh, lean towards Rodgers.
Yeah.
I do lean towards Rodgers. I do think that, especially if we can continue to keep, if this game winds up being at least a competitive game, because both teams are fairly low in terms of neutral pace, so it might look slow, but both teams are fairly efficient, or expecting the Bengals to be efficient today. And Joe Burrow has, for all of the team's faults, not his faults, but the team's faults in terms of passing rate. And the same thing for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, we've seen multiple 3, 4, 5 play drives that have wound up with him either kicking a field goal or scoring a touchdown. So I can definitely see Aaron Rodgers getting back to his Aaron Rodgers ways, assuming that Cincinnati shows up and they're productive on offense too, which we're all expecting to be. I do lean towards Aaron Rodgers being the play over Sam Darnold this week.
Yeah, I agree. And with Darnold, with the Panthers in general, I don't even really know if I know the Panthers offense. Know what they're. I mean, I know that it's DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey when he's back out there, but are they a good team? The one good team they played so far this year, because the Saints were the Mr. Hyde, not the Dr. Jekyll, when they played the Panthers. So I mean, we'll see what Philadelphia does against them this week. But I think that's Rodgers. And one of the things to point out about Rodgers is that if the Packers can control games, we're going back to not 2020 Rodgers, but 2019 Rodgers, where he's not going to throw that many passes. He's probably going to top out under 300 yards. He might not, it's easy to, and Chris, what conceals this is in that first game, he had all those pop passes to Aaron Jones, that Monday night game, that those count as passing touchdowns. Boy, Peyton Manning was hot about that. We didn't have that in the playbook whenever, we didn't get passing touchdowns for that whenever I was playing. But so that even conceals that Aaron Rodgers, even though he's played okay, last year he was playing MVP form. So it's hard to say he was playing as well as last year. But normally this year, I might be fading Rodgers a little bit. But in this game script, I think you're right to point that out. And let's take another quarterback question here as we're starting to wind down. Dane M says, the only reason I put this question up, Chris, is so we can talk a little bit about Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, Joe Burrow, or Trey Lance. And the complicating factor here is 6 point for passing touchdowns. So that it makes it harder to just have a clear take here. But does anybody stand out and talk to me about Steely Dan?
Well, I think in those 6 points per TD, if we're thinking about who's going to throw the most passing touchdowns, we were just talking about while we're trying to avoid the Cincinnati backs, I would kind of lean towards Joe Burrow here at that point. Because we're not expecting much from a rushing perspective from either Samaje Perine. If let's see Joe Mixon does his thing, Chris Evans not really factoring in, at least from a rushing perspective. Daniel Dimes, while he's been great, not taking anything from him. The turnovers hasn't really had too many this season, even though that's been one of the things that we've joked about for him for years now. passing, at least a completion percentage up, deep ball percentage up. I mean, all of the metrics that you would want for a starting fantasy quarterback definitely has that in spades. But he's also got an elite running back in Saquon Barkley sitting there right behind him. And that is one of the ways that you can wind up beating Dallas's defense. So I do think that Daniel Dimes, like, while I think he might be a great play, like from a DFS perspective, if you're expecting, I mean, for 6 points per passing TD, I could wind up seeing like Joe Burrow wind up at least competing with him from that aspect. So I do lean towards Burrow there, but that's probably my Bengals bias, like peeking out.
No, let your Bengals bias. Fantasy football's emotional. Football's emotional. Yes. And I think the Lance and Jones have higher ceilings there. I'm really fascinated by this Giants-Cowboys game, but in a 6-point passing touchdown, I'm all about. I want to get a Burrow jersey. I'm down here in Louisiana, man. I want to root for Joe Burrow. I want to root for the Bengals. I want to see what happens. Before we part, Chris, anybody in your lineup setting today that's perplexing you, or anything that you want to throw out to the chat room or to me or to the universe to say, like, I don't know what to do?
I mean, sticking in that same game, I'm excited. Well, I'm not excited because I hope that they don't wind up winning the game, but I'm thinking that Robert Tonyan has actually fairly decent shot, but I don't know specifically what to do with him, because in most cases you're starting him, right? Because there aren't too many other options. We were talking earlier at the top of the show. It's like, Ricky Seals-Jones, Max Williams, I mean, either of the Cowboys tight ends, if they happen to be on the waiver wire. So you're probably stuck starting him, but it's just, we've seen like the targets have been there. I think Rodgers has kind of laid out a couple of passes for him where if they might have been able to connect, he might have had some better days from a fantasy perspective. Randall Cobb popped up for 2 touchdowns last week. I'm not expecting that to continue to be a thing with MVS out. So I think Robert Tonyan is kind of the play this week from a matchups perspective, but I know some folks have kind of soured on him already. So I don't know. I think it's there though for this week.
It's where this is fun if you can play DFS in your state, that you can put some Robert Tonyan lineups together. And he actually topped out in terms of targets last week, even though it didn't result in production. So that's a reason to have hope. Always hope for our fantasy teams. Yes, including all of us with Kyle Pitts, who's had quite a half, as the Falcons have had quite a half in London against the Jets. And we're going to have quite a day of football today. Topped off with Kansas City, Buffalo. Yes. We love getting excited for Sundays with you. You get us excited for Sundays because we are happy to serve you. It's a privilege. It's a pleasure. Again, folks, one of the ways you can support the show is like the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, footballguys.com, written out in all the letters. And you get notifications so you can know every time we go live, as we are giving you top-notch content all week throughout the season, keeping you company, because you do such a great job keeping us company because you're so very classy.